Bom dia a todos os participantes. Eu sou Luísa Melo, jornalista, diretora de informação da agência Lusa, e queria, antes de mais, lembrar a todos que, devido a razões que estará disponível tradução simultânea em inglês, mas que este debate vai desenrolar-se todo em inglês devido a problemas técnicos surgidos à última hora. Seja como for, agradeço desde já a vossa presença em nome do Clube de Lisboa e, por favor, não se esqueçam de colocar as vossas questões. I will speak now in English. Good morning to all participants. I am Luísa Melo. I'm a journalist and editor-in-chief of the Portuguese news agency Lusa. And first of all, I would like to remind you that we have simultaneous translation here available in English. So you can watch this panel in English by selecting the language, the English, in your option bar at the bottom of the screen. So thank you all for your presence on behalf of Lisboa. Now we'll begin our panel on the importance of the continental shelves, the strategic challenge they represent, and the security problems they pose today. What obstacles are there to their implementation? And we can ask if diplomacy and the law of sea has been effective in preventing disputes between states. The topic will be debated by the members of our panel, which I will now introduce. Admiral Melo Gomes, coordinator of the follow-up group of the Commission for the Extension of the Portuguese Continental Shelf. Duarte Bué Alves, Deputy Permanent Representative of the Portuguese representation to the OECD. And Tetsuo Kotani, Senior Researcher at the Japanese Institute of International Relations, Professor of Global Studies at Meikai University, Urayasu. And finally, Larry Meyer, Director of the School of Marine Science and Ocean Engineering and the Center for Coastal and Ocean Mapping, University of New Hampshire. Okay, thank you very much. So I think that we can now talk a little bit among us and to all. I want to remind, just to say something, we know that in the first decade of the new millennium, we have assisted, it was marked by, in the international level, by a kind of rush of coastal states to fix the outer limits of their continental shelves. Of course, that in the world of shortage of raw materials and other vital resources, the ability to extend the continental shelf beyond 200 nautical miles is of undeniable importance for access to mineral, energy, and biogenetic resources. So I'd like to ask to Admiral Fernando Melo Gomes if there is a lot and different kind of disputes about the continental shelves between and among the states. Do you please can explain to us why there are some and so many disputes, and what is the origin of these disputes?
Thank you very much, Luísa. Very happy to be here, and I have to thank to Club of Lisbon to have this opportunity. And to answer to your question, let me first of all try to share my presentation because it's quite useful for
Admiral, let me say to all, that I want also to remind everybody that you can, and I should say, I would say you should ask questions by Zoom or on YouTube. So, okay, thank you. So please go on. Sorry.
So I think that you can see what is in my screen. Yeah, and I will tell you that the international disputes associated with the extending of continental shelves have origin, in my view, in two main strands. First of all, the resource stress. As I understood, a combination of economic, environmental, political, demographic tensions associated with threats and risks, if not conflicts, arising from the scarcity of depletion of raw materials fundamental to the economy and to the development. The second item that I think is important is the territorialization of the sea provided by the Montego Bay Convention. As you know, UNCLOS, which in addition to postulating the concepts inherent from maritime law, essential founded on custom, established general principles on exploitation of the natural resources of the sea, the living and non-living, and those of the soil and subsoil of the ocean. In addition to the traditional concepts to the territorial sea, contiguous area, etc., the codification focuses in particular on the rights of the economic exclusive zone with 200 miles and the continental shelf, which may extend up to 300 nautical miles. Let me pass to this slide. That's the example of the proposal of the Portuguese extension. But I'm not going to speak about that in any detail. Of course, I think that it's easy to understand that the huge maritime areas adjacent to coastal states that the Convention turns possible, reaching living and non-living resources that we don't know completely yet, but we think that are of enormous economic and strategic potential, and where the states can exercise total sovereignty or simple jurisdiction. It's a highly conductive source of conflicts of interest, not only economic, but also political and strategic. It was no accident that the UNCLOS, having been taking its initial steps in 73, only came to be signed in 82 in Montego Bay. And it should be noted that Portugal only ratified the convention in 1997. And the US, with very relevant maritime and strategic interests, have not yet done so, despite a tentative on Obama administration by 2012. I'm not going to extend much on what is the value of the ocean and the value of the continental shelves on several resources, and of course this is very, very well known for everybody. But I will go mainly to make a vol d'oiseau on the types of the attrition that we can identify on that equation between the states and that are here depicted. I think that it should be noted that the conceptual basis that first shapes the state's argumentation is the aforementioned clause, framed by many diverse legal views and scientific interpretations that the Convention make possible. Of course, the soft and hard power of major powers, it's no stranger to these various possible interpretations in which diplomacy and even coercion have a permanent presence. Without going into detail, the main types of conflicts, of frictions between states are the disputes on maritime borders. We know that we have in the world more than 500 maritime borders, and less of half have been agreed between states. So we have here a cause of the attrition that we can identify in many zones of the oceans. The second item I would like to address is the issue between identifying islands versus rocks. Rocks don't have economical life, and so they are not entitled to have EEZ and, of course, continental shelf. And on the opposite, isles can have it. So the convention is not very well defined, precise on the definition of what is an island or what is a rock, and arguing between states, as we can see further on this discussion. Issues relating the ownership of the territory, of course, mainly islands. That's all over the oceans, especially in the Arctic, as Larry is going to address. And differences as to interpret the rules defining the natural continuity of the territory, which is a condition sine qua non of the possibility of the extension of the continental shelf. This is the 76th article of the convention that has been subject to many discussions and even theses all over the world. Because we have a latitude of interpretation that, of course, it's a source of attrition. Finally, I would like to say that the landlocked states, of course, have the opposition of extending the domains of the riverine states to the oceans, because, of course, they feel that they should be part of the profits that this could have. And of course, the states that have technology to explore the seabed and further on the soil are not interested also to share and to pass that technology to the other states that, of course, don't have. In the broad sense, of course, the major states, the major powers are driving and trying to push the interpretations of those types of conflict in their own profit. And of course, we have here a fight between the power of the law and the law of the power. And I think that's my first intervention, as we should say. And thank you very much for listening. I will be very keen to answer any question that you may have. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Admiral. I'd like to ask now Duarte Bué Alves, the particular question of Portugal. I mean, the proposal to extend the Portuguese continental shelf, started to be discussed at the United Nations, if I remember, in in 2017, although the proposal was submitted in 2009. Is that so? So, can you explain the importance of the extension of the continental shelf to Portugal? And 4 years after this discussion, where do we stand?
Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. And let me start by thanking for the kind invitation of Club Lisboa and Ambassador Seixas da Costa, its chairperson, and also Fernando Cardoso and all his team for the tireless work of putting together all these speakers and different panels for our discussion today and tomorrow. And also, I wanted to salute the partner entities this morning, namely EMSA, where we should be if it was for the pandemic situation, and the Embassy of Japan in Lisbon. Japan is a country that is very dear to my heart. I've lived there and worked there, so I wanted to make this note. And of course, also, I want to greet you, Luisa, and other members of the panel. Well, as you said, and all the process of the Portuguese proposal for the extension of the continental shelf has been developed in the last years based in the UNCLOS Convention that Admiral just referred to, the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea, and it was presented at the United Nations in New York a couple of years ago. In 2017 was the date when the United Nations have established the subcommission that is going to study and analyze the Portuguese process. But going directly to your questions about why is this important to us? Why is this relevant to Portugal, and what have we applied for the extension of the continental shelf, and what are the main reasons behind that? Well, I would say that first of all, there are political reasons. I mean, we are members of the UNCLOS Convention. It's called the Constitution of the Sea, metaphorically speaking. It's the basic law, international basic law of the sea. And as a coastal country, as a maritime country, something that we have inherited from history, and of course, it's the contingency of our geography. I mean, we are entitled to make this, to use this possibility of, and presenting the possibility of extending our continental shelf, and being a maritime nation, having a maritime agenda, and pledging for the maritime debate in the international arena. This is politically consistent with this profile Portugal does have in the international debate. Then a second reason I would point out is that because by doing so, we can deepen the maritime dimension, our openness to the Atlantic Ocean, the way we look at the sea. That's also part of what we have inherited from history. That's part of our position, for example, in the European Union and the European integration process. This is part of a broader geopolitical debate between maritime powers, sea powers, and continental powers. And of course, it's very clear where we stand. We stand on the side of those countries who are more attached, or particularly attached to this maritime dimension, because the ocean has been for us traditionally a way of meeting the world outside. Then the third reason I would point is the economic importance. And the economic importance, I would say, has different approaches or different angles or different dimensions. I mean, the international debate on oil exploitation is an important one, although nowadays more and more our societies are going through decarbonized societies, and we are all striving for societies that are neutral in carbon neutrality. And so that means that the possibility of exploring oil and hydrocarbons is less visible or less interesting and less appealing. Then we have another economic dimension with deep sea mining. And this is also an important debate. I think we'll be particularly focused on our panel tomorrow morning. And this has to do with the possibility of exploring rare earth materials and minerals in our in our extended continental shelf, although there are voices claiming for a moratorium until we fully understand the picture in terms of our environmental consequences. There are immense possibilities in terms of biotechnology, both for medicines, for example, for cosmetics. The industry around cosmetics and medicines, drugs is tremendously important. And even, for example, in the course of the research to combat COVID-19, there are particular developments recently about some chemical elements that are found on the ocean that can be used. Fourth element, or fourth reason, security and defense. And then the Admiral is obviously much more skilled to elaborate on that than me, but Portugal, as a founding member of NATO back in '49, should pay particular attention to this security and defense dimension of the continental shelf. Is not a coincidence that our strategic concept of national defense does make a reference to the continental shelf, and of course both the Navy but also the Air Force may have a role to play. And the final reason, the fifth and final reason I would point out, we could elaborate about this for hours, but the fifth element I would elaborate to finish for now my the answer to your question. The first one, the last one, the fifth and final one would be capacity building, because this is a very complex process from a scientific point of view. And what we have seen in the last years, not only with Portugal, but with all the other countries that have submitted their proposals, is that to pursue this goal, there are lots of scientific studies that have to be done. Maybe a figure that is not maybe is not so familiar to our participants in this conference this morning is that only 19% of the ocean is mapped. So to a large extent, the ocean remains unknown. And by presenting this proposal of extending the continental shelf, what we have to do is to study, to investigate, to do research. And this, we have developed more than 1,000 days of maritime campaigns to do that. And this involves academia, scientists, politicians, decision makers, but also civil society, NGOs, journalists, diplomats. So it's a capacity building, is a broad capacity building where we are all learning. And learning about the sea is surely an excellent way to combat ignorance, because ignorance is one of the enemies we face ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Duarte. I will switch now to Larry Meyer. The Arctic is the area with the most conflict potential of all. I would say. I can mention at least 5 countries interested. I mean, Norway, Denmark, Russia, USA, Canada. So what is so special about this extended continental shelf activities in the Arctic? And how do you think these activities impact in the point of view of diplomacy, security, and strategic issues?
Well, thank you, Luisa, and thank you to the Club Lisboa for this kind invitation, and welcome to all my other panelists. And they offered a tremendous introduction to my response to your question. Let me share my screen and see if that works. Can you see it now? They're just fine.
Yes,
Great.
We can see it.
Yes, and as you point out, the Arctic is certainly the area where there has been tremendous attention for potential conflict, and we see these amazing headlines of battle for the Arctic, Arctic land grab, scramble for the Arctic. Really focused on many of the issues that Admiral Gomes brought up. But the reality is, and this is the interesting thing, and one of the wonderful things about the Convention on Law of the Sea, is that despite all this hype, this media hype, the Arctic nations, the 5 Arctic nations, as you've mentioned, have all really been following the rule of law. They've been using the Law of the Sea Treaty. There has been no real conflict yet, and I emphasize yet because I'll get to the end of my story, which I have some concern about. But so far, it's been just a wonderful example of following the rule of law and how the Law of the Sea Treaty can, in an area where there is potential, really lead to an appropriate way to settle disputes. What's so special about the Arctic, and probably the reasons we have this issue, is that unlike the other Arctic Ocean basins, the Arctic, if you look up here in this area here, all this white area, this is geologic continental shelf. And the Arctic is made up 52% of geologic continental shelf, when every other ocean basin is a much, much smaller percentage. The Atlantic, which is the next largest, is something like 17%. As you see here, the white area here on at least the US side of the Atlantic. Having 52% of the basin be geologic continental shelf means that much greater proportion will be extended continental shelf in the context of Article 76 in the Law of the Sea Treaty. And as Admiral Gomes also pointed out, we have the potential here because this is a very resource-rich area, potentially. It's been estimated that something like 13% of the world's undiscovered oil, 30% of undiscovered gas, and 20% of undiscovered what they call natural gas liquids, gas hydrate, this remarkable frozen gas, are still undiscovered up in the Arctic. And so there's that pressure there that this is potentially a very high resource rich area. But also, and this is kind of the nature of the geography in the region, if we look at the map of the Arctic and the coastal states, the 5 coastal states we see, Russia, the United States, Canada, Greenland through Denmark, or Denmark through Greenland, and Norway, we see that they're all facing each other. They're opposing, as it's talked about in the treaty. And this inevitably means that as they extend their continental shelves, there's going to be lots of overlap. So this kind of really sets the scene, this high research, this high resource area, and this opposing coastlines sets the scene for potential conflict. But as I've said, they have been following very much the rule of law in terms of following the tenets of the treaty. And this has been exemplified by something called the Arctic 5 meetings that have been taking place for the last 10 to 15 years, where the geologists, geophysicists, those folks who are actually going out and mapping and doing the work on the continental shelf, and the diplomats have gotten together each year and exchanged information and talked about collaborations and cooperation. That's been happening very quietly. It's been happening even when there's been tension and other fronts between the nations, and they continue on with these discussions. And a number of years ago, there was actually a very nice sidebar discussion that kind of led to a solution to what is probably one of the most serious issues, and that's what's to do with the North Pole. All these areas converge on the North Pole, and to be honest, every country wants Santa Claus to be their own. And so how do you handle something like the North Pole? And it became clear that the North Pole is a point. And if things converge at a point, it's quite possible to share. And so in these quiet discussions, Canada did not think that they had a valid claim that went to the North Pole, a valid extension, I should say. And Russia and Denmark agreed to converge at the North Pole, and it looked like things were going to progress very, very nicely. The Russians made the first submission back in 2001, and it was rather extensive, as you can see here, the Russian submission, the extended shelf in the lighter yellow, the EEZ of Russia in the darker yellow, almost half of the Arctic. Their first submission was declined by the Commission on the limits of the continental shelf because they had not provided enough evidence. In the meantime, the Russians went back with massive mapping and sampling campaigns and have made another submission in 2015. The only changes in that submission were these green areas, and you'll see the green area, the first one just went to the North Pole. The 2015 submission goes beyond, and you'll see why. that is now well supported with much geologic and geophysical evidence, and that's being reviewed now by the Commission. What happened was that Canada, who was about to make their submission in December 2013, the submission was actually packaged up and in planes to be sent to the UN. At the last minute, a very high-level political decision was made, and they decided that the North Pole and Santa Claus was really Canadian too. And they kind of reneged on that agreement that said that they would not extend their continental shelf beyond the North Pole. And so at the end of the day, when Canada made their submission, it looked something like this, extending well beyond the North Pole. That upset the other nations, unquestionably. This was not what had been agreed upon. Denmark responded with a much, much larger extension than they had originally planned, going all the way to the Russian EEZ. And you can see here everywhere these overlap, and I'll show you that in a different mode in a second. There is tremendous overlap there. The US, as the Admiral mentioned, has not yet signed the treaty or acceded. The Senate has not acceded to it, but we follow the tenets of it. And the US, and this is not official, this is the IBRU's interpretation of where the US extension will be. It'll be something like this. It'll overlap with Canada, and the US and Canada will sort that out. But at the end of the day, we have a very, very complex situation with tons of overlap in the Arctic and great grounds for dispute. So far, the nations are still talking, but we are now hearing rumblings about yet another modification. And if we may actually soon be seeing some unilateral actions. And I'm very, very concerned that if we do see unilateral action, this could be really the demise of the underpinnings of the Law to Sea Treaty. And so I'm very much hoping that they'll continue to talk, but right now it is a very, very tense situation.
Okay, thank you very much, Larry. We'll talk about this, but I think it's very, very interesting, and it's a dangerous situation, as you said. But I would like to ask Mr. Tetsuo Kotani. Asia is another area of potential conflict over the extension of the continental shelf, primarily due to the claims of the Chinese continental shelf in the East and South China Sea. Can you explain to us what the situation is?
Okay, Louisa. First of all, let me thank the conference organizer for inviting me to this interesting conversation. So let me provide the Asian perspective on the continental shelf issues. And let me first share some maps for your reference. So in Asia, we have many disputes. Territorial disputes, maritime disputes, disputes over fishing rights, disputes over the resource exploitation, and even conflict over the national pride at sea. And as you may know, China has an excessive claim in East China Sea and South China Sea. The China's so-called 9-dash line is very well known, and this is the map of the 9-dash line. You know, there's overlapping claims in the South China Sea, but China makes a claim based on the 9-dash line, and this is actually this 9-dash line was first submitted in a rebuttal statement by China to Vietnam and a Malaysian joint submission on the continental shelf extension in 2009. And for the first time, the international community acknowledged China is making excessive claim based on the 9-dash line. And China basically it claims historic rights in the waters inside that 9-dash line. And China is not necessarily clear by what they are claiming based on this 9-dash line. Sometimes they say they have sovereignty in the waters and also the seabed inside the 9-dash line. But sometimes they say they are just claiming sovereign rights on the EEZ and the continental shelf inside the 9-dash line. But in any case, this 9-dash line and the historic rights is not cannot be justified under the UNCLOS. In 2016, the arbitral tribunal made an award on the South China Sea dispute between China and the Philippines. And in this arbitral reward, China's 9-dash line and its historic claim in the South China Sea was totally denied. So based on the conclusion of the arbitration, the states, the claimant states only claim the territorial waters from their coastline and also some rocks existing in the South China Sea. But as well known, China, despite its membership into the UNCLOS, ignored this award, and China continues to claim the historic rights based on the 9-dash line. And China also makes an excessive claim in the East China Sea. This is a seabed map of East China Sea. East China Sea is basically a shallow water up to the Okinawa Trough, but China makes a claim of its exclusive economic zone and also the continental shelf extension based on the natural prolongation of land territory up to Okinawa Trough. And this natural prolongation is not the mainstream view today, but China still makes a claim based on it. While Japan is calling for a median line solution with China, but China has been refusing to do a negotiation on that issue. In 2008, Japan and China agreed on a joint development of seabed resources along the median line. But after the agreement, China is ignoring this joint development agreement, and they are now doing the constructing platforms along the median line without consulting with Japan. And more recently, China is doing scientific research along the Okinawa Trough, which is regarded as a Japanese EEZ. And again, between Japan and China, there's an agreement on the prior notification of scientific research in respective EEZ. But China does not follow that rule, and they just make a scientific research in the Japanese EEZ, ignoring the median line. So they are expanding their claims and also their practice in the East China Sea. And beyond East China Sea and South China Sea, there's a kind of a dispute between Japan and China about the continental shelf. Japan has a small island in the Western Pacific called Okinotorishima, which is located between Taiwan and Guam. and also which is located in the south of Tokyo. And Japan made a submission of the extension of continental shelf in 7 regions, and out of 7, 6 regions have been adopted by the Commission. But one of them, which is the yellow region, is on hold because China is opposing the extension of this continental shelf extension based from Okinawa-Torishima Island. China says Okinawa-Torishima is not the island, it's a rock. So Japan cannot claim a EEZ and the continental shelf. And also the extension of the continental shelf based from Okinawa-Torishima is against UNCLOS. And part of the reason why this yellow region is now on hold is because China made a rebuttal statement. So China, on one hand, making a excessive claim in the East China Sea and the South China Sea, but on the other hand, China is disrupting the other countries' claim on the extension of continental shelf. So this is the major issues in East Asia regarding the continental shelf. But China is the center of all the disputes regarding the continental shelf issue in Asia. And I will try to explain why China is doing so in a later part of this conversation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Tetsuo Kotani. I'd like to, we have already some questions from the audience, and I will put these questions to they are directed to Mr. Admiral and Dr. Bué Alves. And the question are, can we consider that the project to extend the Portuguese continental shelf will be approved? What are the biggest obstacles facing the project at this stage? And furthermore, another question, because I think they are linked, and if maybe you can answer, both of you can answer one or another. The other question, also regarding the Portuguese continental shelf, is apparently the border conflicts of the Portuguese claim for the extension of the continental shelves with Spain and Morocco will be resolved. Why the delay in the approval, in approving the Portuguese claim? I don't know if who wants to begin, Admiral or Duarte? Your microphone, Admiral, your microphone.
Okay, Duarte, if you want, but I can very swiftly answer to those questions. Thank you for the question. And first of all, I would say that I'm not in agreement of what is said, that is a delay on approval of our proposal. I think that the case is making its way, and as compared to the other submissions, I think that we are perfectly in time. I know that we in the Portuguese are keen to have rapid answers on international issues, and on the international scenes and about blue diplomacy, I think that Duarte knows much better than I do. Things are not black and white. and they take time, but I think that we are making good process, and that the timing is quite well in the schedule. I will notice, however, that during last year, the Commission of Limits and Subcommission that deals with the Portuguese submission is not working because of the virus that have prevented the Commission to work even on internet or on internet, Zoom or WebEx or wherever. So we have 1 year more delay on what is going. But regarding what has been said by Duarte on the security around our jurisdictional areas of the ocean, I think that, of course, this is a major issue, and that cannot be underestimated, because the area is already enormous. Our EEZ provides 20 times our territory in the continental Europe, and so this is an issue that we have to consider very carefully. And of course, I will notice that through our waters passes about more than 53% of the foreign trade of the EU, 60% of our exports, 70% of our imports, including 2/3 of the natural gas we consume and all the oil. So this is a major contribution to our economy, and of course I think that the Portuguese public opinion should be aware that if you want to take benefit from that, you have to be present, and the presence will be by the Navy, of course. I'm suspicious on defending that, and with the Air Force, but not only. I think that the space it's today mandatory on the surveillance process, and for the moment that's what I would like to say. I would not enter in details regarding our submission because I'm only supervising, and this is an easy task. The person that is on charge of this is Isabel Botelhau, that is on commission, and she is the expert, and she knows much better than I do on what is going. Thank you very much, and also very interesting the presentation about South China Sea and the Arctic, and I think this gives ground for long discussions.
Yes, I think so too. I don't know if you want to add something, Duarte.
Yeah, thank you so much. I fully agree with what Admiral has just said. I think this is a rather complex process, and I've just while previous speakers were intervening, I was just looking at the web page of the United Nations Law of the Sea Division. I mean, this is available for everybody. It's a complete list of all the countries in the world that have submitted proposals to extend the continental shelves. And so far, we have 88. It was Indonesia. The last proposal was presented by Indonesia on the 28th of December 2020, so 1.5 months ago. And Portugal is in the position 44, as you said, Luisa, in the beginning. We presented in May 2009. What this means, this long list, what this means is that there are a significant number of countries that are submitting their proposals. They are tremendously complex, and if I may use language that everybody understands, this is like when you go to the bakery, it's first come, first served. I mean, we are in position 44, which means that there are 43 proposals before us. And now that we have 88, it means exactly we are in the middle. So there are many, many proposals that came after us. And of course, I mean, we had the pandemic situation the last year. I mean, all the processes were delayed in all the institutions around the world. That's the situation we have to live with. But rest assured, as Admiral said, that, I mean, we keep on working on this. I mean, Isabel Telial was mentioned. She's leading the process in Lisbon. Our colleagues in the Portuguese mission to the United Nations in New York, led by Ambassador Francisco Duarte Lopes, who will participate in this conference this afternoon. They take care of the New York side. And just to give you just a final figure, to give you, to show you the complexity of the process. In 2009, when Portugal presented the process in New York, I mean, 2009 was a long time ago. We were not so digital as we are today. I mean, of course, that nowadays it would be like a computer operationalized program that could be handled in 3 seconds. But at the time, there were 18 files and 6,000 pages, 6,000 pages only for the Portuguese proposal. Now that the United Nations have to deal with 88 proposals on the table, you can imagine they have to deal with millions of pages and an endless amount of information. So, I mean, it takes some time, it's true, but as Admiral said, I don't think we are delayed. This is the normal process of a very complex issue that has to be studied from many viewpoints. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I have another question because we have discussed till now the Portuguese continental shelf, the situation in Arctic, and the situation in the East and South Asia, and specifically the China claims. So, but we have a question from Mr. Abbas Ismail, and I don't know whom of you want to answer. This is how effective the UN Convention Law of Sea in the case of the Eastern Mediterranean, because we didn't talk at all about the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean. I don't know if some of you, Mr. Larry or Tetsuo or Admiral, but I don't know. I don't want that is all the same people, the same of you to answer. Maybe Larry, you can answer.
I'll start, but I'd sure rather a diplomat respond than just a simple geophysicist. I think the Eastern Mediterranean is in many ways like the Arctic in terms of certainly a large focus on resources, with a series of states that have been in conflict, and so it in some senses can be a tinderbox. But so far, again, I think the coastal states are very much trying, at least, to follow the rule of law, and there have been conflicts, there have been statements made that have led to protests, but so far, again, I think it's a thin thread that's holding it together. But I think so far that we're fortunate to have that rule of law to allow those options. But I'd rather hear the Admiral and the diplomats, Duarte, to have their view.
Yes, so I don't know if Duarte wants to answer, or the Admiral.
This is more on the diplomatic side, but Duarte, I can speak about that because, well, I'm less responsible because I'm retired now, so I can speak freely about about those issues. And I know the place quite well because I have operated on the Aegean and on the Eastern Mediterranean for many times. And and I think the demarcation area I can go to my presentation, and because I was preparing also another conference regarding those issues, and I have here some slides regarding the Eastern Mediterranean. So let me check if I can share this, and issues here that we are having.
There is a noise somewhere.
No, it's my phone that is always.
Okay, so.
Sorry about that. Okay, I think that here we have a picture depicting what is really going on the Eastern Mediterranean, and the maritime demarcation has been debated for many years with two obstacles: the Greek islands on the Aegean here, and Cyprus division between the recognized Republic of China, of Cyprus, a member of the EU, and so-called the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. And I think that Turkey did not ratify the convention because, on their view, the application of the convention criteria would turn the Mediterranean in a Greek lake, because precisely the Greek islands are a very few miles off the main coast of Turkey. So this is an ongoing process since the demise of the Ottoman Empire on the end of the First World War. And of course, we are having here the EZ reivindications by Turkey and Greece. We have here the EZ reivindicated by Turkey and Cyprus. And here we have the issue with Northern Republic of Cyprus. So on this area here, on dark blue, it's historically where the incidents have been occurred, and recently we have had mutual harassment with naval ships. In August 2020, a Greek frigate collided with a Turkish frigate that was escorting a research ship to a wood race that was mapping the bottom in search of oil and gas deposits. This was going, and in mid-September, after pressure from the EU, the Turkish retired their ship and prevented sanctions from the EU Council. Well, this is a very tense area of the globe, and this scouting process of tensions that the international community is trying to diffuse is ongoing. And of course, we know that Turkey has intervened in the Middle East many times, and to diffuse this situation, we notice that either the Russians and the US are trying not to overextend this friction, and the proof of this is some restraint on selling military assets. The F-35s that the US was trying to sell to Turkey were on stand, and also the so-called, so famous missiles S-400 for the Russians. And those powers were told that they were concerned that might happen a biometrical exchange of information on those systems. But the real reason was to distend the situation. Of course, in the EU also we have different views on what is going. And I could develop much more on this, but I think that that's enough because we have other issues to be discussed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't know if Duarte if you want to say something, but if not, no. Okay. So maybe I can ask to Tetsuo Kotani questions. This particular situation. This is in the Arctic. One of the problems in the Arctic is the route it may allow by shortening the distance between the Pacific and the Atlantic. Don't the ASEAN countries have a say in this? China or Japan have been vocal about this or not? I'm very curious.
Yes, in fact, Japan, China, and South Korea, all the major industrial countries in East Asia are very much interested in the Arctic shipping lane. And in fact, among the three countries, although we have many disputes among ourselves, we have a common interest in this Arctic issue. And at least among the scholars and the research institutions, there are growing joint researches and a joint cooperation among the three countries. So this Arctic issue possibly might be one good area of cooperation among the three countries. But problem is, you know, for China, the waters around Japan is a shortest route for the Arctic, and the presence of Chinese ships, not only the commercial ships, but also warships, is increasing. So we have problem with China in the southern part of Japan over territorial disputes, and also the continental shelf extension, as I explained. But in upper north, Chinese presence is increasing, and particularly the warship operation in upper north is becoming a concern for Japan.
Mm-hmm. Larry, I don't know if you have, if you can say something about this. Larry, your microphone.
Yeah, it's we certainly have noticed the intense interest of Japan, China, Korea, even Singapore, and clearly the interest is in the potential of a short route. And as an academic, I think anything that leads to cooperation on behalf of nations is good. I worry if we go back and we look at, or if we remember the map that I showed of the extended continental shelf submissions, there's very, very little of the Arctic that will be what we call the area, that will be not under the jurisdiction of one of the coastal states. And while free navigation and free access is assured by the treaty, the Arctic has an interesting extra special case, I think it's Article 234, which talks about the rights of the coastal states to put on special regulations in ice-covered waters. And I worry that this, again, may lead to some more level of tension as we start seeing the coastal states, which will have jurisdiction over almost the entire Arctic basin, start being concerned about issues of pollution and things like that. There are, this is again a ground for cooperation and treaties in terms of pollution issues, but by asserting Article 234 in leading to potential tension with states outside of the Arctic. So again, it all will fall back to Duarte and the diplomatic corps to sort all this out.
Yes, Duarte, can you say something about this?
I don't. Yeah,
no,
sure.
Please.
I don't want to comment on any specific cases. I cannot do it. But
this is diplomacy.
What I wanted to say, and that I think it's rather uncontroversial, is that I think we all around this table and everybody around the world, I mean, almost everybody around the world, we believe in the primacy of the law and in the power of diplomacy. And these two elements combined, these two elements together, have proven, despite all the difficulties, despite all the problems, despite all the conflicts, despite all different legal readings, these two instruments have proven tremendously powerful and capable of responding to major disputes or to major situations around the world. So as a diplomat, I cannot say but that I do believe in the power of diplomacy and that I do believe in the power of international law, the United Nations Charter, the United Nations Convention of Law of the Sea, and they are very relevant tools that bring together partners, stakeholders from around the world in a multilateral environment. Because, I mean, Portugal does believe, I do believe, but Portugal does believe in an effective multilateralism, and we do believe that the multilateral environment, namely at the United Nations, within the United Nations framework, is the right forum to tackle all these issues and to bring together different views to solve all these issues that we have spoken about here this morning.
Okay. This is diplomacy. We know the limits of the diplomacy. But maybe Larry or Tetsuo, we have a question from Renata Fleck here. And I don't know if you want to answer, if Larry, if Tetsuo, is why extending the continental shelf if it is to exploited more our oceans? What are the benefits and to who? Larry, maybe you are an academic also, so please.
Yeah, that's so it's easy for academics. I think I've always looked at the treaty as a two-edged sword. It certainly, at least from an Article 76 perspective, in terms of the continental shelf, gives a coastal state the right to exploit its resources and have some jurisdiction over the resources of the seafloor and the subsurface. But at the same time, it gives the coastal state the obligation to protect them. And to me, that's the beautiful balance that, if a coastal state has the spirit and the will to protect it, it becomes a wonderful instrument for establishing that protection too. So I think it has struck a wonderful balance in terms of a right to exploit, but an obligation to protect. And I'd love to hear what Tetsuo has to say.
Tetsuo, can you say something about this?
Yeah, so in addition to what Larry said, particularly in Asia, there's a strategic and military aspect of the continental shelf extension. Mm-hmm. China believes they can exercise their sovereignty, not only over the territorial waters, but also the contiguous zone, EEZ, and even the continental shelf. So China believes as they expand their jurisdictional waters and the continental shelf, they think they can expand their sovereignty. And, this has a tremendous impact on the military operation. There's a growing military tension between China and the United States. particularly over Taiwan. And if there's a military conflict over Taiwan, it is expected that the United States would intervene. But China needs to disrupt the US military operation in the Western Pacific. So as they expand their jurisdictional waters in the East China Sea, South China Sea, and even in the Western Pacific, they believe they can enhance their military operations, especially submarine operations. You know, to operate a submarine, you need to map the seabed, and you need to collect the data of water. So as I showed in my map, China is doing the scientific research in the Japanese EEZ, you know, partly because they are searching a seabed mineral and the resources, but a part of the reason should be they are collecting data for their submarine operation. So in Asia, this continental shelf and the EEZ closely linked to the military issues.
Thank you, Tetsuo. Maybe I would ask to Admiral, if you can add something about this security dimension of this big problem in Asia. Your microphone, please.
Well, thank you very much. I think, well, not being diplomatic because it's not my.
You are not a
job.
diplomat.
I think that the militarization, both in South China Sea and the Adriatic, is ongoing. To my knowledge, I might be a bit wrong on what I'm saying. But really, if you allow me to share once more my presentation, I think that I could go and speak a little bit on what is going.
This is the Mediterranean.
I know. I have to go again. But the presentation is this one. I try to go to another point of the globe. Of course, this is China Sea with the disputes that Mr. Tetsuo Kotani has shown, and I think it's broadly the same map. And what is happening is that the disputes are going between China, Malaysia, Vietnam, Brunei, Philippines, Taiwan, Japan, etc. And China is considering the China Sea as its strategic lake. And so China feels that their key interests, military, economic, etc., are putting at stake by those disputes. And of course, she is preparing, and we can notice the development of even islands made by sediments and sand that China has been building on South China Sea, islands that they claim to be their sovereign territory. We have here an example on Spratly, and you can see a port, you can see a highway running for an airfield, and of course this has been putting a tremendous pressure in the countries around, especially since China has had an enormous development of its navy. now they have 2 aircraft carriers and are building another one. And of course, they are constructing those type of infrastructure that both have the capability of projecting military power and, of course, claiming that this is sovereign territory. They may claim EEZ, they may claim territorial sea, they may claim extending continental shelves, etc. And of course, this is putting pressure on the surrounding countries. And China is saying that they are not, they would not allow any military information gathering to go in these waters. And of course, the other nations are contending, saying that nothing in the North Sea prevents to do that. And the stakes are rising also with Taiwan. And here we can see the Chinese Navy. And here you can see the answer of the US. For the US, the US is saying that the freedom of navigation cannot be put in stake on South China Sea. And they have conducted several exercises with neighboring countries in there. And also, we notice that we are having also European ships and submarines going there. So all this is it's not classified. It's on the newspapers and on the net, and that's all that I can say about South China Sea. I don't know.
You finished?
Yeah, on South China Sea, yes. If you want, I can speak about.
No. Because we have another questions, and we have only 10 minutes to end our discussion. So I don't know if maybe Larry, because you are an academic, and Mr. Tetsuo Kotani, but we have a question from Extensão Cristas from Portugal. And I think you can read it, but I will read it to our audience. And she's asking, and I read, considering the phasing out tendency concerning oil extraction and the potential of deep sea bed mining for rare minerals, I would like to ask, where do we stand concerning environmental impacts at the global level? Is there a contradiction when the world swears commitment to the planet's health and at the same time knows so little about the environmental impacts of deep seabed mining? This is really a good question. So do you want to answer, Larry? Your microphone.
Yes, no, it's a very important and very serious question. And again, I come back to the balance I see in the treaty itself that talks about obligations from an environmental perspective of a coastal state. With deep sea mining, we're often talking about areas beyond national jurisdiction. And here, this opens up a whole another can of worms, so to speak. But and again, this is probably something Duarte could speak better about. But there's the BBNJ. There is, for the first time over the last 10 years, been negotiation for looking at those aspects that the treaty itself really didn't know about when it was being negotiated in the 1970s. And so there is lots of focus on biodiversity and other environmental concerns beyond national jurisdiction. I think we have to have faith that within national jurisdiction, we have to fall upon the good faith of the coastal state to uphold its responsibility to be a guardian of the environment. beyond national jurisdiction, that is where the Wild West can be. And I think here's where BBNJ is starting to address the issue. Unfortunately, like most UN activities, it's a long and drawn out process. It's been 10 years to even get to a start of that, and it will probably be many more. Tetsuo?
Duarte,
Yeah.
I don't know if you want. Sorry, Tetsuo. I'm sorry.
No, I'm fine. I think Rory explained quite well.
Yeah. But you don't want to add anything about this?
Well, just briefly, we have the rights to exploit the resources in the seabed, but at the same time, we have the obligation to protect the environment. And the question is how to balance these two issues. And plus, I think Duarte also mentioned that, we have to consider the climate change issue and the decarbonization, and how to integrate this climate change, climate protection into the maritime environment issue is a critical one.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tetsuo. And Duarte, do you believe that this issue, this environmental issue, can be put in the core of the diplomacy in this subject?
Yeah, yeah, I think it has, Luisa. Honestly, I think there is no alternative. Sustainability came here to stay, and it's not gonna go away. And what we have seen in the last years, and namely in the last year with the pandemic, is that we have to shift to a sustainable model. And when we speak to building back better, this after the crisis that we are going through, it has also to be building back greener and building back bluer, because there is no space for activities that are not sustainable. There are no space, there shouldn't be, for activities that do damage to the ocean, to the environment in general, but let me focus on the ocean, that damage the ocean, because we have to absolutely preserve it. We heard it in the previous session with the speakers that have so well emphasized this. About deep sea mining, let me just add 2 words. The potential and the possibilities of deep sea mining are enormous. Rare earth minerals are tremendously important, and they are used in objects that we use every single day, maybe hundreds of times a day, like mobile phones. To build these mobile phones we all use, we need these rare earth materials. That is true, but it's also true that the environmental impact of deep sea mining is a relevant element to be taken into account. So if you ask me what my position is the same of the European Parliament. The European Parliament approved in 2018 a moratorium saying that we should not go into deep sea mining activities until we study, until we do an environmental assessment of the impact. I'm not saying that I'm in favor or that I'm against. What I'm saying is, at the moment, we still have to do a very precise and scientific environmental assessment of deep sea mining. And once we have that, and we have all the elements on the table, then we'll be able to make a decision if we want to go for it or not.
But Duarte, we have a question, a very interesting question coming up. Is this from Bruno Botil? And he said, yes, of course, countries have the right to exploit the resources on their shelves, but also have the obligation to protect their resources. But the obligation to protect their resources, particularly the living marine resources, is by voluntary, not compulsory commitment. Or it is also, is it also sometimes compulsory? Plus, who is the authority supervising that living marine resources are properly protected? Do you know, Duarte?
Yeah. I understand I understand the dilemma behind that question.
Yeah,
I do understand, but let me just give you an example. It's a parallel example. Carbon neutrality is not compulsory. I mean, it's a pledge that a significant number, Portugal is committed to carbon neutrality. The European Union countries are committed to carbon neutrality. Some countries outside Europe, they have pledged for 2035, some others for 2050, some others for 2060. But we have to decide on which side we have in which side we want to be. Either we are on the side of the solution or we are on the side of pollution. And if each member does that his or her own commitment, its own national commitment, there we are all on the right side. But the key word here for me is environmental assessment. Let's study before taking a decision.
So there is no authority supervising this living marine resources are properly protected.
Larry spoke about the BBNJ. I mean, there are the international, the BBNJ is an agreement that is being studied within the UN framework, for those who are not experts on the field, about biodiversity beyond national jurisdictions. And so the international community is looking at it, is studying, and is working on this legal agreement. And this could provide some of the answers to the question that is behind the question you've just put from one of our listeners this morning.
So Larry, please, talking about this voluntary and compulsory actions, yet the US is not party to the law of the sea treaty till now. What is going on? Why?
Yeah, this is and first I have to preface my statement that I certainly don't speak for the US government. This is
of course.
A personal, but this is a very sad story. While the US is not, the US actually did sign the treaty. President Clinton signed the treaty, but the United States Senate has not acceded to it, has not confirmed that. And this is really, I think, an internal problem in the US in the nature of our system, that one or two senators, if they're truly opposed to something, can basically prevent something to come before the full body. Almost every administration, the Admiral mentioned that the Obama administration made an effort to get the treaty ceded to, get what we call the advice and consent of the Senate. It's actually been supported by every administration. And there's support across the board, but there are a few individual senators who just don't want to see it come up to the floor. Despite that, the US recognizes the treaty as international customary law. It abides by the tenets of the treaty. And I can, from a personal perspective, attest to the fact for the last 20 years, we've made a very, very significant effort in mapping our extended continental shelf. We are putting together a submission, and we hope by 2022 to have a complete submission for all US areas. And there'll be interesting legal questions. Our lawyers contend that we have the right, because in its inherent, a continental shelf is an inherent right. We have the right to actually make that submission to the Commission. We'll see how that is viewed internationally. But the intention of the US is to basically follow all the tenets, make a submission for an extended continental shelf and submit it to the Commission.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's a quirk of our internal system.
Yeah. So we have a final questions. It is now time to end our panel, but we have a final question, and I would like that one of you can answer. Is from Roberto Sambe. He asks, with disputes over the extension of continental shelves between countries, how can we together address the problems of the oceans? This is a question to all of you. You want to answer, Admiral? You have the microphone.
No. I will say a very simple statement. That's what Duarte has said, is by the obedience of law and stick to the programs. And one thing that is very useful is to have a common sense. That is good, that everybody thinks that have, and so by the economic rules doesn't have any value.
Okay, Duarte, I don't know if you want to say something about it. Duarte?
No, that's exactly. I mean, I fully agree, and it's what I've said before. I do believe in the primacy of the law and in the power of diplomacy. And I think with these two tools, we shall find the right answers.
And I think we can all acknowledge that with the Law of the Sea Treaty, it's not a perfect instrument, but it is a remarkable instrument, and it really does set a spectacular framework for, I think, a bright future of settling these kinds of disputes.
Tetsuo, do you think that regarding the situation in Asia and in this particularly zone, do you also believe in the force of diplomacy to solve the problems in the region?
Yeah, of course. We all discussed the importance of the rule of law and the power of law and the diplomacy. The problem in Asia is China believes that the Chinese Communist Party is above the law, and Communist Party rules by law. So this is the problem. So sometimes they utilize the Law of the Sea Convention for their national interest, but sometimes they just ignore the rules by the convention. So that's the problem, and I'm very much encouraged by more and more European countries are now making a statement against the Chinese claims in the South China Sea. And the maritime rules needs to be universal, and we should not accept a double standard. So as more European nations and other parts of the region join the Asian nations to stick to the rule of law, I think we can have a better situation.
Thank you, Tetsuo. So we are finishing. I'm sorry, because I know that all of you will have much more to say about this issue. I think it's very, very important issue in the years to come, but it's the end. And before ending, I would like to remind you that our conference will continue at 2:30 p.m. with a topic no less interesting and even directly linked to this one. This is the melting of the Arctic. Larry, it's good for you. Melting of the Arctic between a climate disaster and a brand new sea lane for containers. So the next panel will be very important also. Thank you all, and thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.